unprecedented world attention. On August 31, 1995, as the UN 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing was underway, the 9 Tibetan women launched what would become a defining act of peaceful protest. The Tibetan women delegates gagged themselves with silk scarves given by China to guests at the opening ceremony of the 4th World Conference on Women. Protesting China's continued violation of Tibetan women's fundamental reproductive rights, these women staged a silent vigil in the pouring rain, demanding the immediate cessation of all violent actions against women. Messages of encouragement were received from His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Parliament in exile. Tibetan Women's Association has maintained a consistent presence at the international conferences on women. TWA has continuously increased social activism through petitioning the United Nations to enforce human rights accords in Chinese-occupied Tibet. At the 61st session of the United Nations Commission for Human Rights, TWA's president delivered a 3-minute oral statement on women's rights, focusing on the situation inside Tibet. TWA's president attended the 36th session of the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women in 2006, of which China is signatory, and presented a 33-page alternative report. International campaigning continued in March 2007 when TWA's president visited the universities and colleges in the United States of America and Poland in Europe. TWA's participation at the International Women's Peace Conference signified concrete international recognition of Tibetan women's achievements in the international peace politics, and thus bring about true and substantive changes for Tibetan women inside Tibet. Since 1951, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has worked to maintain a sincere dialogue with the Chinese authorities regarding the political situation in Tibet. His foremost concern has always been securing the safety and the well-being of the Tibetans remaining in their homeland. Later on, in 1996, 4 options were presented for the Tibetan population to choose that would secure the future course of action. On the 22nd of April 1996, the TWA executives gathered for a workshop in New Delhi, India, detailing the 4 proposed parts of the Tibetan political policy. On April 26, a referendum was passed in support of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's decision for the middle way approach. During the 5th General Body meeting, the members discussed the agenda and resolved that the decision on the issue should support the people of Tibet, and that His Holiness the Dalai Lama should be urged to take decisions on the basis of the changing global political trends. However, after a lack of sincere effort on China's part, the Tibetan Women's Association staged an all-India peace march. Beginning on March 12, 2005, on the 46th anniversary of the Tibetan Women's Uprising, the demonstrators demanded an immediate start to truly substantive Sino-Tibetan peace talks and sought to galvanize support for the middle way approach. In some cases, it is hard to recognize the progress made because so few tangible developments have been made in 7 years and 7 rounds of talks. It is now time for the Chinese government to recognize the substantial efforts made by the Tibetan people and thus commit to a meaningful dialogue. The year 2008 bore witness to an unprecedented uprising in Tibet A year now after this peaceful uprising, over 6,000 Tibetans are still imprisoned and over 4,000 Tibetans are missing, on top of the over 200 lives lost during the subsequent military clampdown. On January 4, 2008, an official unified declaration was announced that the Tibetan People's Uprising Movement would be reborn and through a series of strategic campaigns lead the Tibetans back to their homeland. The March to Tibet was cooperatively organized by the 5 largest Tibetan non-governmental organizations. The march began on the 10th of March with 100 highly energetic core marchers setting off from the Tsuklakang temple. However, after a massive effort from the protesters who walked 1,400 kilometers through testing conditions, the Indian police stopped them at Darchula, just 180 kilometers from the Tibetan border. The goal of the march was to rekindle a unified non-violent protest in the form of a walk from Dharamsala, India to Tibet. Tibetan Women's Association is proud of the strong presence of over 65 female march participants. Tibetan People's Uprising Movement emphasizes that it will continue to pursue its aims to revive the spirit of the Tibetan National Uprising of 1959 by engaging in non-violent direct action to bring about an end to China's illegal occupation of Tibet. Commemorating this, the 50th anniversary of the Tibetan women's struggle generates the passion, the force, and the conviction that will provide the direction for future political movements. In expressing our sincere gratitude to the government and the people of India, we would also like to humbly thank the international community for their overwhelming support. Even after 50 years of struggle, there can be no rest, no respite, and we cannot give in to the Chinese government while Tibetans inside Tibet remain abused, manipulated, degraded, marginalized, and subjected to inhuman treatment. The restoration of a peaceful Tibet, as envisioned and outlined by His Holiness the Dalai Lama through the Middle Way approach, will have lasting global effects. After 50 years of watching these dark clouds cast their darkening shadows over Tibet, we will not back down. Tibetan women will stand up, bear witness, and fight for our people, for our culture, for our land, until freedom is restored in Tibet.